Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, Sam Latimer recently said to me, Neil, do you ever begin to tire of the digital transformation on all the headlines in the media at the moment? And I must admit, I completely get the fatigue around this area, but the reality is, digital transformation is a journey, not a destination. It's not a project you can sign off, complete, and then move on to the next big thing. And I think many businesses just didn't get that and beginning to show signs of being a little bit weary now, and their efforts are beginning to fail as a result. But Tony Saldana is the author of a book called Why Digital Transformations Fail. And after a 27-year career at P&G, where Tony was VP of Global Business Services and Next Generation Services, he is now the CEO of a company called Transformant, which is a consulting firm that provides advice to boards and CEOs in Fortune 500 companies on that subject of digital transformation. And in the past year, he has advised C-suite leaders in more than 20 Fortune 100 companies. So I decided to invite him on the podcast today to discuss what simple 2 things can be done to counteract digital transformation failure, how artificial intelligence and blockchain are actually being implemented, not in the future, but right now in large, complex organisations, and why it's critical for organisational leaders to get their organisations ready for a digital world right away and get rid of that fatigue that I was mentioning a few moments ago. So let's get Tony onto the podcast now to talk about all that and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Thank you. Delighted to be here, Neil. I am president of a small little consultancy called Transformant. I advise about 20 of the Fortune 100 boards and CEOs. I come out of a 27-year career with Procter & Gamble, where I was vice president, and I led global IT and shared services, which at P&G is about a $2 billion entity in every region of the world. And so I left them about a year ago and have written a book called Why Digital Transformations Fail. And I'm, happily into my second career right now.
Fantastic. And it does seem that everyone is talking about the digital transformation of everything at the moment. And some business efforts I'm noticing are beginning to stall and others are failing. But what can be done to counteract digital transformation failure, do you think?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a hot topic and it does have more than its fair share of failure. In fact, 70% of all digital transformations fail, which is a horrendous statistic, given that this is a $1.7 trillion industry. So in all of the research that I did, in addition to my experience of leading large transformations at Procter & Gamble, I've gotten it down to 2 major causes, right? The first is actually language, right? You ask 100 executives what digital transformations mean, which, by the way, I actually did as part of my research. And then you actually get about 100 different answers, everything from, oh, don't worry about it, it's all hype. I used to have digital watches in the 1970s, all the way to the other extreme, which is, oh, you got to worry about it very much. It's all the artificial intelligence and robots that are going to come for your jobs, right? So that's one issue. And then the second issue is that the actual execution methodology, which the world follows for the most part on digital transformation, is actually not the best suited for digital transformation. It comes out of the IT project management methodology, which is fine for technology change, but it is actually insufficient for what digital transformation really is, which is more about organization change and rewiring than about technology change.
And you did mention a few moments ago that you are the author of Why Digital Transformations Fail. So can you tell me a little bit more about that book and also the inspiration behind it?
The book was released actually less than a year ago, about 6-7 months ago. And I've been surprised. It's done extremely well. It started off as #1 on Amazon for hot new releases in organizational change. Has seen already about 6 or 7 language translations and other stuff. And I think the reason why is because of the original point that you made. Digital transformation is indeed #1 on board of directors, CEO priority lists everywhere. And I think people are starting to really get frustrated with the large failure rate. So, they're looking for answers on why digital transformations fail. So in the book, what I do is I put this in the context of what exactly is happening around in the world, right? I firmly believe that we're in the midst of the 4th industrial revolution. And unlike the first 3 revolutions, which, as you know, were all driven by, mechanical and steam technology was the first. The second one was electricity, and the third one was actually the birth of the internet. This one's a little different in the sense that a technology, which is the digital technology, is actually eating all of the other technologies. So whether it's medical, i.e. genetics, or physical technology, i.e. drones and Internet of Things, or even social technology, such as Facebook and stuff like that, right? And in the context of industrial revolutions, digital transformation, the correct definition should be about rewiring enterprises, that were extremely successful in the 3rd industrial revolution era to be successful in the 4th. And so, obviously, if you follow that chain of thought, it's not about technology change. So it's not about going to the cloud or artificial intelligence or what have you. It's really about complete new business models and about rewiring the way organizations and enterprises are run. And so that's a lot of the work that I've done in leading up to the book. And the book was really, inspired by some of the work that I did over 27 years at P&G. And just, this insight that, it's time for us to do much better than the 70% failure rate.
Absolutely. And for people that may be interested in checking out the book, what are the big takeaways from it, would you say?
The big takeaways from the book are that digital transformation, the 70% failure rate, is actually not, it's not a given. It doesn't have to be that way, right? And the answer to doing better than that is actually an interesting word. It's about discipline, right? It's discipline in understanding and linking digital transformation to enterprise strategy. And, that drives everything that you do. And discipline in following the right methodologies to execute it, right? So what I have done in the book, despite the title, which seems to indicate it's more about failures, it's actually a book that's a recipe on how to be successful on digital transformation. So what I've done is I borrowed liberally from the methodology that was used in the airline industry first, and then more recently in the medical field on reducing error rates, failure rates, and applied that to digital transformation. And what I have done, therefore, is created 10 different elements and checklists within those elements that can help you be successful on digital transformation.
And of course, digital transformation has become somewhat of a buzzword, but no more so than artificial intelligence and blockchain and so many other emerging technologies. So I'm curious, how are you seeing, let's say, AI and blockchain being implemented in large, complex organizations now, not just planning for the future, but actually implementing it now?
Yes. Firstly, to your point, indeed, artificial intelligence and blockchain have become buzzwords, right? And that's kind of understandable. I mean, I see where this comes from an IT industry standpoint, right? If you have something that's really, really disruptive, the only way to get noticed is, unfortunately, to kind of market it and hype it. And, that's the nature of the industry. And we're not going to change that. But, how large companies that are successful in this are starting to approach it is by, focusing less on the technology itself and zooming in on the use cases, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples. Um, about 5 years ago, which is when I created an organization called Next Generation Services, which simplistically, think of it as the equivalent of like a Google X, which is the Google organization that is responsible for driverless cars and other 10X, meaning 10 times type disruptions. So I created the equivalent of that, but in a very boring area of internal business operations. So HR and finance and so on and so forth. Right? And in the process, really started on this journey to better understand digital disruption, transformation, blockchain, AI. I mentioned earlier that I sought about 100 different executives. One of those that I met about 5 years ago was the CEO of a startup called Winolo, and he and I were playing email tag, trying to set up a time to meet. And this was April of 2015. And one of the emails he says, "All right, I'm available, whatever, the 1st or 15th." And I said, "Unfortunately, I'm not, and I'm also out the next week." And then, his next email is copying Amy, who I assumed was his admin, who'll set this up. And so Amy comes back over email, gives me a lot of options, and then my admin picks one of them. And this sounds like a fairly typical email, phone tag or email tag game, except that as I double clicked on the link for Amy, I found out Amy was a robot, right? And I had absolutely no clue in replying to the very pleasant Amy while this was happening, that Amy was a robot. But the reason I mentioned this was it gave me an incredible insight. We think in terms of technology, AI. We ask ourselves, is technology ready? That is the wrong question. We should be asking, what specific use cases of AI are ready? So 5 years ago, the use of calendaring, including calendaring for the CEOs of small companies, was ready enough for Winolo to be using it, right? And that's the key insight. I mean, what large companies are starting to do is look to very narrow use cases where AI is ready and available, such as the use of AI for claims and deductions management in accounts receivables, or the use of very specific chatbots, or the use of AI as part of optical character recognition, or the use of blockchain for international shipping documentation across different entities, customs, freight forwarders, shipping companies, large companies, so on and so forth. These use cases are very, very ready, and that's the best way to go after these technologies.
And the problem for a lot of business leaders and teams listening is they're going to quickly feel overwhelmed by just how much technology is out there and how quickly they have to adapt. And although the speed of technological change is moving at breakneck speed, the problem, of course, is it's never going to move this slow again. So can you expand on why you think it's so critical for organizational leaders to get their organizations ready for that digital world right away rather than keep putting it off?
Yeah, there's a framework that I came across called Martek's Law, which basically says that technology grows exponentially, whereas organization capability grows logarithmically. Actually, it's worse than linearly because it flattens after some time, right? And so the point there is that the difference between an exponential curve, which is like a hockey stick that goes up, and a logarithmic curve, which is like a a curve that flattens into a plateau, is the longer you wait, the bigger the gap between those two curves, right? And so as leaders, with the context, with the understanding that we're in the midst of an industrial revolution, right? And in industrial revolutions, you're going to have exponential winners and unfortunately exponential losers. And time is your enemy. The longer you wait, the bigger the gap between these two curves that I was talking about. And that's going to be a challenge. I mean, the longer you wait, the lesser your chances of actually pulling out successfully from this industrial revolution.
You're so right in what you're saying there, especially businesses that are answerable to shareholders and struggle to get that investment. So do you have any tips for businesses that are struggling to keep up with that pace?
Yeah, I think, some of the things that I learned, firstly, is that, there is no time to engage in what I call innovation theater, right? So, don't do things like, setting up innovation centers, either in Silicon Valley or other stuff, because they tend to play with technology. Yeah, they're not playing with very specific strategic issues necessarily the way you need to, right? The first thing that I learned was start with strategic business goals. So what are you after? Are you trying to create a new business model? Are you trying to create smarter products? Or are you trying to drive, as I did at Procter & Gamble, dramatically better, 10 times better internal business operations, and get very specific on where those losses exist, either in terms of dollars or people. And then, start to look for specific use cases, not broad-based technology, not platforms, but specific use cases that exist out there, and start to work with those. Start now. Don't make this a big deal. Don't wait for technology to be ready, right? So that's lesson number one. The second thing that I learned was that this isn't the time to make big, wild bets. So, don't take all of your innovation money and, put it on one idea. Run with a portfolio of ideas, just like Google X does, just like venture capitalists do, just like you do with your portfolio of savings. I mean, you have high risk, high return type of investments, and you have low risk, low return type of investments. And, what you're looking for on an average is for the portfolio to be successful, right? And in order to do that, you're going to have to place many small bets as opposed to one big bet, right? So, if you approach it that way, I think you have just a much better chance of coming out of this more successfully.
So also, you're from Transformant. Can you tell me a little bit more about how Transformant are actually leveraging emerging technologies and helping businesses do the same and everything that we've talked about?
Yeah, so Transformant is the first of a kind type of consultancy that actually brings together three things, right? So what I bring together is of course the process and the methodology of how to make digital transformation successful. But then the second is that I leverage a global ecosystem of experts who bring in not just one set of technologies or perspectives, but capabilities on demand from the latest startups or the latest emerging technologies, so that you can focus your attention on what's almost there in terms of solutions, but not quite scaled. And then the third reason why Transformant's kind of unique is because we focus on essentially driving scale change. So it's not so much about the next shiny little toy. It's about how do you change business outcomes to your shareholders or stakeholders, or Wall Street metrics, and that's really what we're attempting to do here.
And what excites you about the future at Transformant? I appreciate you probably can't share too much about the kind of work that you're doing, but is there anything in particular that you'd like to shout about before leaving us today?
Oh, absolutely. Would love to do that. So what really excites me is the fact that as a company, we're in a unique position to work with Fortune 20 or Fortune 100 kind of companies to help systemically change this 70% failure rate of digital transformations. And the reason why I honestly find that very exciting is because I think that, if you agree that we're in the midst of an industrial revolution, this is a huge opportunity. And large companies have the resources, they have the money. What they have working against them is, sometimes, they're like aircraft carriers on the ocean, right? So, they're relatively slow moving. But what excites me is this insight and the methodology that allows us to work with them to say, you can be a aircraft carrier, but here's a part of your strategy that can actually be a speedboat. And, that's what we try and bring together. And it's been a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to doing more of that.
Now, I know you do speak to a lot of large organizations and you're helping them there. So for anyone listening that'd like to find out more information about what you're doing, buy your book or just find out more information about Transformant and maybe contact your team, could you just point them in the direction of how they can do that?
Absolutely. So the book is available online and, in pretty much all bookstores, on Amazon and elsewhere. The book is called Why Digital Transformations Fail. The website is www.transformant.io. So that's the word transform and the insect ant, kind of mushed together into one word, transformant.io, India, Oscar. And the book is also has more information online at www.whydigitaltransformationsfail.com.
Excellent. Well, I'll add all those links to the blog post that will accompany this podcast over on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. But I can't thank you enough for coming on today. So much value in counteracting digital transformation failure, how artificial intelligence and blockchain are being implemented across large, complex organizations already. And also, of course, why it's so critical for organizational leaders to actually get ready for that digital world right away. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to come and speak with me today. Thanks again, Tony.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Neil.
Tony's book, Why Digital Transformations Fail, has been added to my must-read list, so I will be checking that out. I am currently reading The Future Starts Here, Adventures in the 21st Century. So if you like to read or you prefer Audible and you've got a credit left over, it is a cracking read that will blow your mind and certainly make you see the world a little bit differently. But after that, I will check out Tony's book too. But I'm curious, what did you think of today's conversation and the kind of messages that Tony is delivering to some of the biggest companies in the world? And indeed, what do you think about the current climate around digital transformation? Your successes, your challenges, your fails, whatever it is, I'd love to hear from them. And you can do that by simply sending me a quick message that I can read out on this podcast. Or you can actually come on the show. There's always an invite to everybody listening if you'd like to spend a few minutes with me revisiting this topic. Whatever it is, simply email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or you can find out more information about over 1,100 interviews, or you can also find over 1,100 interviews on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, where you can also find how you can work with me, whether it be outsourcing your business blogs or helping you create your own podcast. Whatever it is, you should find the answers there. And if you need me for anything, well, I'm nice and easy to find. But I don't want to outstay my welcome. We've had a great time together today, and we will do it all again tomorrow. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.